All right, welcome to part two in this series on stress and trauma and what we can do about those things and what they are. And that's what this second part in the three-part series is going to be focusing on. By the way, let me introduce myself in case you're just coming in part two. My name is Wesley Lawton. I'm the therapist at All Things Grow Counseling, and I specialize in helping people with stress and trauma, as well as grief and faith and spirituality issues. My private practice is here in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and I see people in person here as well as all across the state via telehealth therapy. So I'm excited to be talking about this issue of stress and trauma, and I hope that this video is really helpful for um, your understanding of what these things are, how they affect our lives, where they come from, and what we can do about them. In particular, towards the end of this video, I'm going to be letting you know a really powerful way to greatly decrease and even eliminate stress from your daily life. How does that sound? So, first, let me talk about what stress is and why we have stress and how it relates to trauma. And I've got this chart that I find to be very helpful. Eventually, I'll get a laminated color version of it, but for now, I have this black and white version that I printed offline. And I've seen this image in lots of places. This one says that it originated from um, Ruby Joe Walker, from Cheryl Sanders, Anthony Twigwheeler, and Stephen Porges. So I don't know if these people came up with this diagram, but boy, is it great. And so I will link a color version in this video on my website. If you want to see the color version and look at it in more detail, I'm not going to be holding this up to the screen. I'm not going to be doing any fancy video editing where I, put this in front of me for some parts of the video and everything. Video recording is not really my main gig. I do this in a way that's easy and simple. So what I'm going to be doing is pointing to this, and I will encourage you to open the file that I'm going to link with this video on my website. And I'll link it if I post it on YouTube as well. And you can kind of follow along. Okay. Um, so I'm going to be using this, but stress is basically our responses to a perceived threat. Okay. Our brains are designed to keep us safe, keep us healthy, keep us alive, to help us survive. Um, and so, if we wanted to look at this from an evolutionary standpoint, it's how our species has gotten as far as we have. Our brains have kept us alive, helped us survive. And part of that is being able to respond to threats, right? I'm not going to walk out in the middle of the road to get run over by a car because my brain is not going to allow me to think that that's a reasonable thing to do. Um, my ancient ancestors out in the fields, camping next to a forest, if they hear a rustling in the bushes, they're going to grab their spears. They're going to wake up their friends. They're not going to be able to fall asleep very easily because their brains are trying to help them survive and stay alive. Okay, so let me start by saying that overall, stress is a good thing. It's an adaptive thing. It's how we got here. Um, and there is this distinction between eustress and distress. I won't spend too much time on it, but basically, eustress is a way of describing stress that is adaptive, that's helpful, that does keep us alive, that helps us to accomplish the things we want to accomplish, right? If I want to be successful in my work and I have a big report due at the end of the week, then my stress is going to push me to do that, to do it effectively, maybe to stay up late and work on it if I need to. I wouldn't be able to do that without eustress. I would just kind of not care about it and not perform well in my job. So, um, eustress is the sort of positive adaptive stress, but then there's also distress, and that's the opposite. That's the stress that gets in the way. That's the stress that makes it harder for us to go about our lives in the ways that we want to. It's the stress that makes it hard to focus, hard to listen. It's the stress that makes it um, hard to respond to the actual threats that we encounter, even if those aren't physical, threats of physical harm. So our brains are really the way that they are, partly because of um, the things that have kept our species alive for as long as we've been around. And so, anybody who studies science or listens to scientists for any amount of time will know that we are not our brains are not necessarily designed to work perfectly with the life that we live. For example, our brains are not equipped to handle the internet. Our brains are not designed to be able to respond effectively to all of the information that we are bombarded by when we engage with things online, with breaking news, right? That's a new phenomenon in human history. With all of the different causes and all of the suffering that goes on in the world, all the things that where people are asking for our help with, those are very new phenomena in our lives that our brains are not really equipped to handle, and we have to do some hard work to figure out how to handle those things effectively. That's a very easy example. There are many other examples as well. Um, Stress is, I just want to emphasize, a good thing. It's an adaptive thing. It's a part of how we got here as a species, but it can also get in the way, as you know, right? Being stressed out in your day to day life is not a fun experience. And so that's what I want to talk about. Now, let me go ahead and pull up my chart here. This is about the polyvagal theory. It's a very widely accepted theory, and I hope that you will find it helpful. It is a model, it is a theory. It's not something that is proven to, you know, kind of be the be all end all way of understanding the ways that our minds and our nervous systems work. But I hope that you'll agree after I talk about it that it's a really effective and helpful way to understand things. So the idea, polyvagal, the poly part means multiple, it means more than one, and it talks about our vagal systems, referring to our dorsal vagal nerve in our brain. That's the part of our brain that responds to threats. Okay, and so I won't get too much into the neuroscience jargon. I don't consider myself a total expert in that area to begin with, and so I can totally empathize with anyone who's just like, oh no, is this going to be a whole bunch of like 4-syllable words that I don't understand? That's not what I'm here to do. I want to make this simple and helpful for everyone. Okay, so there's these three modes of functioning in the polyvagal theory. The first mode, which is the default mode for a healthy brain, is the ventral vagal mode, the ventral vagal system. And by the way, I've referred to our central nervous system a little bit. All that is the nerves that run from our brain down our spine. It's the way that our brain tells our bodies to respond to things, and then our bodies send our brain feedback for what it's experiencing, and then our brain gives new information to our bodies. That's a very simple way of looking at it. Okay, that's our central nervous system. Very important part of our body that a lot of us don't think about or talk about in our daily lives. So these are three different kinds of modes for our nervous system to be functioning in based on perceived threat. Okay. Ventral vagal mode. Uh, and you can see here up at the top, it says social engagement. So in other words, when we're in this place, this ventral vagal place, this place of perceived safety, where we do not perceive a threat to us or to the people who we love, we feel like we're safe, and we feel like things are predictable enough, stable enough that we can live our lives without stress. When we have stress and we're in this mode, we ideally reach for social engagement, right? So I'll give an example from my own life. I was having a stressful time a few weeks ago. I was processing all kinds of changes in my life and all kinds of pressures that I was under, processing my past and who I am today. A lot of stuff kind of hitting my brain all at the same time. And thankfully, I was in this ventral vagal mode because I started talking to my wife about it. And I sought therapy for myself. And I talked to a friend about it. And so that's something that I just kind of started doing naturally. And understanding this towards the end of a particular day when I was doing a lot of this stuff, I was like, oh, there I am reaching out for social engagement to deal with stress. Okay, so that was a great reinforcement for me that I'm in this healthy place. But as you can see here, when we're in this mode, um, we have a lot of adaptive things that we want to have in our daily lives. We have calmness and connection. We feel settled and grounded. We have openness and curiosity. We can feel compassion, right? Open to the helping with the needs of others. We can be mindful and in the present. And over here, it talks about our nervous system. So our digestion is functioning well. Our immune systems are functioning well. We are able to rest and recuperate even when we're awake. It's a mode of rest and recuperation. And our we're breathing more deeply. Our heart rate is at a nice, healthy, low place, low enough. Okay. Um, and really, the only downside to being in this mode is that if there is a threat and we're not aware of it, then we're not going to be equipped to deal with that threat as well as in this second mode, which I'll get to in a second. So, if I'm in this mode and somebody walks in here with a weapon, or an airplane crashes through my wall, or there's a sudden earthquake here in Michigan, right? I'm not going to really be heightened and ready to deal with that threat right away. It's going to take a second here for my body to be able to respond to that threat, and that couple of seconds could mean life or death. Okay, so that's really the main downside to being in this ventral vagal mode. But in our modern world, where most of us are physically safe the vast majority of the time, I hope that's true for you watching this video. This is really the mode that we want to be in for the most part. Now, this next part, this is the sympathetic mode, and this is hyper arousal. So we are more aroused. Arousal referring to our perceived threat, and our bodies are heightened and using more energy to be able to respond to that threat. You've probably heard this term before, fight or flight. That's referring to responding to threats. If something is dangerous, I want to be able to either get away from it or fight it off, whatever is more appropriate in that moment. And in order to be able to do that, my brain, through my central nervous system, is going to be telling my body um, to start burning up calories, using up energy. It's going to be shooting adrenaline into my muscles. And by the way, you may be able to tell, again, this neuroscience and physical stuff is not my area of total expertise. Okay, I might be more competent than the average person, but if I get a term wrong and there's some scientist out there who specializes in this, just be patient with me. Okay, but I think that I'm close. I'm not talking way outside my competence here. So when I say, for instance, shooting adrenaline into our muscles, I'm sure that's not really the way that it works. Okay, but that's an oversimplified way that is hopefully accurate enough. Okay, so if our brains are telling our bodies to fight, then we're going to feel a lot of rage and anger, irritation, frustration when we're in this mode. And by the way, these are things that we can experience even when there's not a threat. That's why I'm talking about this. If our brains are telling our bodies to move away from the threat as opposed to moving toward it, we're going to be experiencing more likely panic, fear, anxiety, worry, and concern. We want to be able to get away from that scary, dangerous thing. That's a good thing. We want to be able to do that when something like that's actually present. So, what's our nervous system doing? It's increasing our blood pressure. It's increasing our heart rate. Again, it is burning up calories, utilizing adrenaline. Our oxygen is traveling through our body more quickly because we're going to be able to need to use up that energy with oxygen, the help of oxygen. We have defensive responses going up, and our ability to store fuel, our ability to conserve energy, of course, is going to go down because our bodies are doing the opposite. Can't process insulin as effectively, can't digest as effectively, can't think as clearly, don't have as wide of a field of vision. Literally, we can get tunnel vision to focus on that threat and what's it going to do. Um, and our immune systems are going down when we're in this mode. Okay. And one thing that I find kind of interesting is that I know that in the US military, especially in some of the most demanding branches and groups in the military, they're trained to be able to go from here down to here when they need to. Um, because there are times where being able to physically fight off a threat is not what they need, even though there is a significant threat, right? They have these weapons that they're using to do that work for them. So, what they need is to be able to be calm and make good decisions and think about the context of what they're doing. And so they're trained in a similar way to what I'm going to be training you in to be able to um, decrease their mental arousal and uh, get their nervous systems and their brains into this place where they can function more effectively and where you can function more effectively in 95+% of your daily life. Okay, so this is the sympathetic system. And in this part, our brains are saying, I can respond to this threat. Okay, so that's better than the next one, where we don't fight or fly, but we freeze because we feel like I can't respond to this threat. It is overwhelming to our brains and our nervous systems. And uh, we believe that we're going to die in those moments. Whether or not that's rationally true, that's what our brains and our nervous systems and our bodies are experiencing, is that I'm going to die. I can't do anything about this. Or um, this is so harmful and I can't do anything about this. And so I'm just going to try to do what I can to survive by any means necessary. So what happens then? Well, this is hypoarousal. Our arousal um, in our body actually goes down once we get to this point. So this is where we dissociate. We really zone out and disconnect from the present moment. We feel physical numbness. Anybody who's been in this place who has been greatly injured, you know that the pain doesn't hit until later when the actual arousal goes down because our bodies are numb, trying to help us just get through that moment. More likely to feel depressed, again, helpless. We're able to deal with more pain in those moments because of the numbness. We feel shame. Again, I can't respond to this threat. I'm not strong enough. Um, we shut down. Really, parts of our brains, if you look at an MRI scan, actually shut down. Parts of our brains in those moments effectively die as we feel like we are at a serious, serious risk of death in those moments. We feel hopeless. Um, and we start, our life flashes before our eyes. That's where that phrase really applies. So here again, it's basically a lot of the opposites of here, because what we need, what our brains perceive that we need in this moment, is the opposite of what we perceive we need in this moment when we can respond to the threat versus when we can't. So our blood pressure's going down, our heart rate's going down to extremely low levels, muscle tone's going down, facial expressions and eye contact really shutting down. A lot of stuff shutting down here. You think of your phone going into low battery mode, right? Everything shuts down just to survive, and it's moving a lot slower in order to accomplish that goal. I didn't come up with that metaphor ahead of time. I'm pretty proud of that one. So, anyway, at some point, whether we get to here, whether we stay here, or whether we get all the way up to here, the perceived threat decreases and our central nervous system deactivates, and we go down from here to here, from here to here. Okay. Um, and what can happen, this up here, this is where trauma is stored. So let me take a second to define trauma and really tell you how it relates to stress. Because here we're talking about stress. We're talking about perceived threats and the ways that our minds and bodies are responding to those perceived threats. Um, so trauma is extreme stress that is stored in the brain because the parts of our brain that normally would process that in a healthy adaptive way are shut down in order to try to keep us alive. And so those are encoded in our brains as not as ideas, not as rational kinds of stories that we tell ourselves, but as uh, what's the word? Um, Hmm. I hate when I can't find just the right word and it's on the tip of my tongue, but um, it'll come to me later. Anyway, as actual experiences, visceral, that's the word, as visceral experiences that we can sense, that we are experiencing with our bodies. It feels real and in the present. It's encoded in our brains in that way to deal with and process later in the ways that our brains can do as effectively as they're able to based on what we go through. Okay. Um, so the a lot of kind of left brain parts of our neurology are shutting down. Those are those logical narrative parts where we can make sense of things. And it's encoded in our more of our right brain, which is the images and the experiences and the senses. And so what happens with flashbacks, with re-experiencing trauma, is that those parts, primarily in our right brain, are kind of offloading onto our left brain and saying, that experience that you went through that you haven't processed through, here's what happened. Here's the story. And I'm going to present this in a way that is visceral and experiential. That's why it literally feels like you are back in those stressful moments when you have flashbacks for anybody out there who's experienced PTSD in that way. Okay, so this is where trauma usually happens. Now, let me define trauma in a little bit more kind of liberal way, a little bit freer way. And that is anything that you have, any stressful experience that you've been through in the past that continues to negatively impact you in the present. Okay, so that's a little bit more open way. So it can be things like uh, war and combat. It can be things like um, rape and other types of sexual assault. It can be things like a car crash. These are the kinds of um, classic traumas that we think of when we consider PTSD. But it can also be just really stressful things that we go through that our brains aren't equipped to handle. And a lot of times these are things that we go through in childhood, especially before around the age of the onset of puberty, around 11 or so, because our brains aren't equipped to handle those things as effectively as they are when they're more fully developed. So you can encounter things that wouldn't overwhelm you today. Somebody raising their voice at you, right? That might get you into that sympathetic fight or flight mode, but it's not going to get you into that dorsal vagal freeze mode where we feel like our life is threatened. But when you're a kid, somebody raising their voice at you in a certain way at a certain time, if it's the right person, that could feel life threatening actually to a child because of the way that their brains and their central nervous systems are able to process that or are not able to process that. Um, it could be something someone says to you that just cuts deep and you don't know how to respond to it in that moment. It can overwhelm you enough to be encoded as trauma. And when you think about what they said, you're going to go back to that moment and you can hear the tone in their voice and you can see the look in their eye, perhaps of disgust, or some other expression that indicates that there's something very wrong with you and that makes you feel shame. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about trauma. Trauma is stress that is encoded in the brain when we're in a moment of feeling overwhelmed and unable to process it, and it kind of dumps off onto us in the future. And it affects negatively the way that you think about yourself, the way that you feel emotionally, what you believe about yourself, and therefore about your experience, your environment, your relationships. It can affect everything. And if you think about the kinds of mental illnesses that people have, um, a lot of them are, as I talked about in the last video, rooted in trauma and traumatic responses. We come across what are called triggers in our daily lives that remind us in some way of that thing that we went through that we haven't processed through that felt in that moment, whether it actually was or not, it felt life threatening. And so we respond disproportionately with anxiety or with shutting down, with depression. Um, it can come out as addiction, substance abuse. It can come out as behaving in ways that we don't want to behave. It can come out physically, somatically. It can come out in stomach aches and headaches, and a lot more serious medical problems can actually have their roots in trauma as well. And so, if you get your trauma treated effectively, it can have a positive impact on you physically. Think about some of our physical responses, right? Our immune systems shutting down when we're in this mode or when we're in this mode. Um, so, if you can um, decrease those traumatic effects or eliminate those traumatic effects, you can see a boost in your immune system. You can live longer. You can add years to your life. It's a very serious thing here we're talking about. Um, and by the way, when we have these kinds of experiences, it teaches us that the world is not a safe place. It teaches us that certain relationships and certain kinds of environments are not safe. It can teach you that no environment is safe. And it can lead to you getting into this mode very often or even constantly. For some of you watching this video, this might seem actually normal. This might be your default. And that is almost certainly because of something that you've been through that has taught you that the world cannot be a safe place. You don't feel safe in your own bed, in your own room at home, when you have no reason to feel, no rational reason to feel unsafe. The world still feels unsafe. And so you're here, you're ready to respond to a threat that is not there, right? That's maladaptive. That is distress. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, I'm going to talk more next time about how to treat trauma. Um, and so today, let me talk about how to decrease and even eliminate stress. And this can be stress that you're experiencing because of an actual threat or an actual kind of perceived danger, even if it's not a physical threat. It might be like mentally or environmental kind of threat. You feel like something is uh, a threat to your situation or to your kind of standard of living or whatever. I mean, threats can come in all shapes and sizes and forms. Um, and our bodies are going to respond to those threats in the ways that they're designed to respond to those threats. And a lot of times, that's going to be with distress. That's going to be with stress that's maladaptive and that actually gets in the way instead of helping us. And so I'm going to give you a tool to be able to decrease that stress so that you can actually respond to what's going on in a more rational, effective way where your stress is not getting in the way, but you can actually calmly, maybe you need to talk someone to someone in a calm voice and pick just the right words and try to empathize with them and the kinds of things that we can't do effectively when we're in fight or flight mode. Or maybe you just want to have more energy at the end of the day and not be burning up a bunch of energy because of stress triggers that you come across in your daily life. Like I put this into practice, and I'm not going to hype it up too much more here. I'll get to the point here, but I've put this into practice in my daily life here as a therapist at work, or whatever you're going about doing in your daily life. Raising your kids or being with your partner or whatever. Um, Situations where you are not under actual physical threat, and yet there are all kinds of triggers. There are all kinds of things that are stressing you out and making you feel like you're not safe. um, so I talked about that kind of feedback loop where our brains are telling our bodies what to do, our bodies are sending our brains feedback. And the most powerful way that we know of to respond to getting into that mode of distress and fight or flight when there's no actual threat is through muscle regulation. Let me tell you something that um, it had such a huge impact on me when I learned this, and I hope it does on you as well. A positive impact. That's that scientific research has shown us for decades, since really the 1940s, consistently that when our bodies are completely at rest, it's impossible for our brains to feel stress. Let me repeat that for emphasis. When our bodies are completely at rest, it's impossible for us to be stressed out. Wow. So, if you can rest your body through regulating your muscles and thereby regulating your nervous system, um, you can eliminate stress from your daily life. Now, you might be in a situation where there are so many triggers, or because you've been through so much trauma, that um, your muscles are going to tense right back up again. You're going to go right back into sympathetic fight or flight mode. It might take 30 seconds or something, but at least for those 30 seconds, you're going to get into ventral vagal mode where you feel safe, and rightfully so. And in many situations, you're not going to go right back into that. It's going to have more of a lasting effect. Okay, so this is a short term solution. It's not a long term solution. Long term solution is um, getting out of situations where your brain is perceiving a threat, whether that's by addressing your trauma and processing that in a healthy way so that you don't have this idea in your brain that the world is not safe, or that so many situations are not safe when they actually are. Or um, maybe you in your daily life, in your work, or in your maybe you're homeless watching this video, and you're in a situation where you're actually not safe, right? You're going to be encountering um, rational, sensible stress triggers in your daily life, and so your body's going to respond in a way that's going to try to keep you safe. That's going to keep happening, and that's actually a good thing, even though I wish that you were in a safer feeling situation. Okay, so here's that tool of regulating your muscles. Um, it's simple. It's almost laughably, painfully simple, but it's so powerful. And I hope you'll do it with me. So first, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is the most disturbance that you can imagine, and 0 is no disturbance or completely neutral, rate how you're feeling right now. Okay, so I'll give you my honest number here. I'm gonna say probably like a 2 or so, right? Because I'm making this video, trying to do a good job. I don't want to have to do a take 2 because I'm covering a lot of content here. And I'm trying to be accurate and professional and all these kinds of things. Um, and so I'm at a 2, which is, significant but not huge. Um, and maybe you're at a 3, 4, 5, 6, hopefully not a 7, 8, 9, 10, but it's possible that you are, okay? Now, keep that number in mind. And I'm going to teach you 2 easy, accessible exercises that you can do anytime, anywhere that can bring your stress level down. And it's through muscle regulation. So the first one is the fastest, and you can do it really just about anytime, anywhere, especially if you're sitting down or laying down. And um, I'm blanking here because there is a term for this exercise that I heard, and it's like wet fish, limp fish, wet noodle, something. I don't know. Let's call it the limp fish. Okay, so silly but memorable. And basically, you're just going to make yourself limp. Okay, so wherever you're sitting, you're probably sitting watching this video. I'd be willing to bet. You're just going to relax in your chair, or if you're laying down, relax in your bed or on the floor, wherever you are. Take a deep breath, and when you exhale, relax as many of your muscles as you can as you sort of sink into your chair. So let me demonstrate it, and I'll do it one more time. You can do it with me. Here's the demonstration. That brought me down to a 0, or maybe somewhere between a 0 and a 1. And if you were at a 5 before, it probably didn't bring you down to a 0. Probably brought you down to the 2 or a 3. I would be willing to bet, maybe even a 1. But that took all of 3, 4, 5 seconds. You can do it anytime, anywhere. And you can do it over and over again if you have to. Maybe not back to back to back, but you can do it, and then 2, 3 minutes later, you can do it again. And you'll be right back down to that ventral vagal, safe, healthy mode of functioning. Okay, here's the other exercise. This one takes slightly longer, but it's even more powerful. This is a body scan exercise. It's a very fast body scan meditation, if you will. All that it is you're going to notice the tension in your muscles as you scan through your body and relax your muscles. Simple as that. So start at the top of your head and close your eyes if you feel safe to do so, or soften your eyelids and listen to my voice. I'll guide you through this. Notice the muscles in the top of your head and relax them. And we're going to move down through different muscle groups. So in your face, including your jaw, your tongue. I tend to push my tongue up against the roof of my mouth. So relax your tongue, your neck. You can wiggle around a little bit if you need to, your shoulders, your upper arms, your lower arms, your hands and fingers, your chest, your abdomen, your back, your pelvic area, your buttocks, your thighs, your calves, just relaxing your muscles as you go, your feet, your toes. And if you have time, go from bottom to top just to kind of solidify that. So go ahead on your own, go from bottom to top, focus on those muscle groups and relax your muscles. And hopefully that brought you down to a 0 or a 1, maybe a 2 at the most, depending on where you started. It's pretty powerful, huh? And again, you can do this anytime, anywhere. You don't have to close your eyes. I do this with my eyes open sometimes when I'm driving and tempted to feel some road rage, right? That's not going to help me. That's not going to help me drive safely or make better decisions. And so I'll try to relax my muscles as I'm driving and be in that place of more adaptive functioning. Okay. So there you go. The limp fish and the body scan. You can do it anytime, anywhere. Very powerful. There are other exercises such as progressive muscle relaxation that takes even longer and is even more powerful if you want to look into that. So I hope that you find that helpful. And so next time I'm excited because we're going to talk more specifically about trauma and how to treat trauma. And I'm going to tell you about my favorite way to treat trauma that I find to be the most effective with the most people. not totally effective with everybody, but the most effective with most people, and that's EMDR. So I'm going to get into that, talk about what it is and how it works and why it works, and address a couple of questions that I got about it when I posted about this on Facebook. So I'm excited to take you with me and go beyond just treating stress, talking about actually treating trauma and finding freedom from trauma to really be your full best self as you go about your daily life. So I have a client here coming up. I don't have time to record part 3 of this video right now, so I'm going to do a costume change before I do part 3. And very excited to share that with you. Thanks for sticking with me. This is a long video, probably the longest of the 3 parts. So I hope you found the information helpful. See you next time.